Hey guys, and welcome to another BMS video. In this one we're going to talk about Joysticks Set Up in BMS 4.33. Now I recently just upgraded to Windows 10, and I'll talk more about that in other videos. And you can notice that the resolution now is 1080p, so yay. I finally joined the technology club. But hopefully you can see things a little bit better. And in 4.33, the issue that I kept having is my joysticks kept getting unmapped by BMS. So I'll walk you through how to do that. But first, let's talk about just the basic joystick setup. This is exactly like the 4.32 setup, but hopefully it's better quality, and hopefully I can do a better job of explaining why I'm mapping certain things and not mapping other things. Okay, so let's start off over here in this diagram here. This is the F16 HOTAS, which stands for hands-on throttle and stick. It's the real system used inside the F16 for pilots, including in the Warthog, the A10 Warthog, and the F18. They also use a HOTAS system. It's not the same as what this is going to be, but they're very similar in a lot of respects. So the side control, let's get right to it. Obviously the first thing you want to map is your trigger. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing down here in my CH Products Manager. Now this will work for any joystick HOTAS system, and it's just kind of getting you thinking about what you need to map and where you need to map it. Okay, it doesn't have to be CH Products or a Warthog or something like that. Okay, so first thing is a weapon fire gun. So you can see this is what I'm actually pressing. So as I press different things, you can see it moving around. Okay, so weapon fire gun, you want to look for that, and you want to map it to your trigger there, obviously. Second thing is pickle, weapon pickle right here, and that is going to be the bomb release and missile consent release as well. Okay, moving on to the right side, if you have one of these, you want to assign the side button here to HOTAS. This stands for nose wheel steering, air-to-air or air refueling disconnect, and missile step. In other words, on the ground it controls your nose wheel steering. When you're air-to-air refueling, it'll reset your reset your air-to-air refueling door in the F16, and then when you're in air-to-air mode or in air-to-ground mode, if you're selecting different ordnance or you want to select a different station, okay, on your left or right wing, you can use this as a missile step as well, and you'll see the weapon cycling through the storage munition set or the storage munition system. Alright, so then let's get into the kind of nitty-gritty stuff. I think this is the point where people start to get confused. Alright, you still need trim whether you're flying the F-16 or the F-18 Hornet in BMS. Alright, the flight control system, it's fly-by-wire, so the computer tries to smooth everything out for you. So if you're maintaining 5 degrees up, pitch, the computer's going to try to get that for you, right? But it's not perfect, so you have to fine-tune that all the time. And the only way you can do that is with aileron control, trim control, excuse me. So obviously, elevator down is going to be nose down. Don't get confused by this. The elevator's moving down, that's going to actually move your nose down as well. But all you have to know is if you hit this switch down, you want elevator down. If you hit it up, you want elevator up. Wherever you're pointing the elevator, that's where your nose is going to go. Okay, so if you want nose up trim, you're going to hit up on this. If you want nose down trim, you're going to hit down on this. That's it. Very easy. Aileron left, aileron right, obviously. Okay, and then we move down here to this area. All right, and you can see here, this is the display management switch. Okay, display management is all about controlling your MFDs without actually having to get your fingers on them. All right, so the display management system, you're going to be able to select your right MFD or left MFD and do various other functions. DMS up is up on the switch, down, left, and right. Pretty self-explanatory. All right. If you want the maximum amount of realism, you want to map it like this. And it's not just about realism, it's actually about practicality. There's a reason why real F-16 pilots and F-18 pilots and Warhawk pilots use the hands-on throttle and stick system. It's because it works. It gets your fingers off the MFDs and onto the joystick and throttle and keeps you in the fight. and there's so many things you can do with it. You can control radios, flares. Moving over here to the TMS switch, that's targeting management switch, and that's going to enable you to lock up targets. All right, so just think, you're going to fire a Maverick. You need to lock up that heat signature, that tank first, and then fire it. If you're going to deliver laser guided bombs, you need to get the TGP or the targeting pod on the target that you want, and then you're going to TMS up, which means you're going to lock that target up, and then you're able to drop bombs. Okay, so very important to have that. TMS up. TMS down is going to be the opposite of that. It's if you want to unselect the target. And then TMS left has limited function. TMS right also has limited function, but you still want to have those in there. All right, for instance, when you're cycling through air-to-air contacts in track while scan or TWS mode, you're going to want to use TWS right. Okay. So that pretty much sums up the side-step control, except for one thing, and that's the pinky switch, which is down here. Okay, obviously HOTAS pinky switch is what you want to map that to. Some people have a paddle, some people don't. Okay, I personally don't, so I can't map it. All right, so moving on to the throttle. All right, you obviously need to have your actual throttle axes mapped to that, and the way you do that is you just go over to Advanced and you go to Flight Control, and here you have your rudder axis. So I can move my my SciTech rudders left and right. Obviously, here's my throttle. Move it up and down. And then you have your brake. That's going to be your left toe brake, and then here's your right toe brake. That'll be your right toe brake. I have SciTechs, and you actually have to reverse both of those in order for them to work properly. Okay. And another thing that you want to do is the axis control. Right? If you have a little mini joystick, which a lot of HOTAS systems do, you want to map cursor X and cursor Y. Okay, my Y-axis for some reason is backwards, so I had to reverse it. And then I would give yourself a little bit of saturation and dead zone if you need it. Saturation is just going to kind of smooth out that movement. Okay. Now I just thought about it. If you're having issues where you can't move the cursor certain places, then try just turning saturation off. Okay, and possibly the dead zone as well. All right. But if you want to smooth it out a little bit, you can turn these on. Okay. The cursor X and cursor Y. Anytime you see somebody moving the little cursor on the radar or moving the TGP around. Excuse me, actually, you can move the TGP with the cursor. Yes, you can. Anytime you see somebody moving, don't quote me on the TGP. I actually think you might not be able to do that with the cursor. I can't remember now. But you can certainly move the radar cursor, right? So if you want to lock up a target, and then you can also move the move your little cursor on the horizontal situation display. And now thinking about it, like if I'm lasing a target, I can move the TGP around to a certain area with that cursor. So the way you're going to designate targets and move your cursor to designate either an air-to-air contact on the radar or an air-to-ground contact using the targeting pod is by using this cursor X and cursor Y. So it's important that you have this at your fingertips, okay, instead of using clunky keyboard commands or something like that. Sorry about the brain lapse there with the cursor. Okay, so that's number one right there. And then let's look at the actual diagram here. Dogfight modes are going to be selected on, I have them selected in this little area right here, okay? And there's some basic functions that you want to have. Number one, if you hit this switch to the left, it's medium range missile override mode. In other words, it's going to automatically select your AIM 120s. If your Master Armor's on, you're going to be able to fire those. And the AMRAM is a beyond visual range, or BVR weapon, okay? This mode is more for a visual engagement. So let's say you're closing on that MiG, you're past the 30-mile mark, maybe you fired on him, and now he's like 10 miles away, or maybe a little bit more than that, and you have visual on him. Well, you can go into medium range missile mode, and that's automatically going to select your 120. You'll be able to lock him up and fire off a shot, okay? When you go into dogfight override mode, which is this switch down, that is going to clear your HUD of all the clutter, and it's only going to show your very basic lockup symbology. It's going to show your aim 9 sidewinder symbology, where you get that growling tone in your ears, and then you're also able to fire the gun without having to manually select gun in the MFDs. Okay, so now dogfight overwrite mode is really something where you're in a in a dogfight against the MiG or something like that, or maybe you're pulling off target, and all of a sudden you see a couple of specks in front of you, and you think they might be enemy aircraft. You can go into dogfight mode. If you're now we're talking more close range, we're talking like 5 miles or less. And it does some interesting things, like your radar will automatically lock a target that's in front of your nose, so you can actually fire an AMRAAM at AMRAAM short or a Fox 3 short, okay, and you have access to all your air weapons. So it's important you have this. And then this switch to the right is going to be override cancel. So if you can see here, it's MRM / dogfight mode cancel. It just gets you back into your normal mode. Okay, and then I have up here, this is really the only place where I can kind of map this, and I think if you look at the you can see here there's a manual uncaged switch here, manual range and uncaged switch. I don't have that. You might have a an F-16 HOTAS which actually has that switch, but I don't, so I just use this switch up, and that gives me an uncaged capability. With the Sidewinder, you want to uncage it if you want the seeker to kind of look around and not be fixed to one location. With the Maverick, you have to uncage it if you want to see the weapon picture at all, okay? And I think that releases a little kind of cover off of the Maverick, and you're able to actually look at what the Maverick is looking at. All right, so that's very important. Okay, so moving on here, this is your mic switch. And typically it's going to be, I'm trying to remember the actual order here. You got your VHF and UHF frequencies. And I'm looking for it right here, antenna elevation. We'll talk about that in a sec. Here's your communication switch. And you can see the diagram, down is for, or actually, am I looking at it the right way? I'm sorry, up is for VHF, down is for UHF. Okay, and that's exactly how I have it mapped. The way you remember that is ultra high frequency. You're going to be talking to the tower. You're going to be talking to forward air control, whatever the case may be. It's anybody on the ground. Okay, that's why it's down. VHF is typically reserved for your flight members or your flight, okay, or your package. So that very high frequency, you're going to be talking to your flight members. So just think up in the sky is your package. So that's how you remember whether you toggle up or down. Sometimes it gets confusing. All right. To the left and right, it's IFF out and in. Okay. You don't really need that because you don't use it in the sim hardly at all, unless you're transferring data or you're hosting a data link. All right. Pretty much the only time I use it is I'll hit the F7 key, I think it is for me, and that is IFF right, and it accomplishes the same thing. So in other words, you won't really be using IFF in and out, so I wouldn't map them. I actually have it mapped to weapon air-to-air cycle hardpoints when I go to the left, and then I have weapon air-to-ground cycle hardpoints when I go to the right. And what that enables you to do is go AIM 120, AIM 9, or go LGB, JDAM, Maverick. You can cycle those without having to actually touch the MFDs and cycle it with the storage munition system. All right, I know some of these terms, I'm just throwing them out there. If you're new to BMS, a lot of the terminology is not going to make sense to you, but that's okay. Just trust me, and trust that the real F-16 HOTAS is more than likely proper. Okay, so this is probably the way that you want to set it up to get the most out of the sim. Other people are going to do it a little bit differently. This is just kind of my way, and what really works for me. Okay, I'm really trying to eliminate switches that aren't practical, that you don't use all the time. Okay, and IFF in and out are one of those selections. All right, so moving up to the bottom here, this is an extra switch for me, and I just have it for some miscellaneous things like and I take that back. Actually, you can't control your air brake. All right. I'm trying to find it on here. Here's the speed brake. It's not even shown on the diagram there. You do want some air brake capability. All right. So whether you're joining up on your flight and you need to slow down, which you should be managing your speed, hopefully, so you don't have to use that, or you just need to slow down for whatever reason, or on landing, you know, like in an overhead brake or something, you want to have the capability to do that. And so my my switch is left, it's air brakes close, and air brakes right is open. All right. And then up for me is virtual cockpit, which is the number 3, and that just takes you into the 3D cockpit. And down is orbit, that's number keypad 0, and that takes you around so you can look with your mouse and look around the aircraft, things like that. All right. So let's see. We talked about the dogfight modes. Talked about that. Okay, up in the front of the stick is the cursor control and cursor enable. Okay. And this is different than I'm sorry, it's exactly what I mapped to up here, to these axes right here. Right? This is what moves your cursor around and things like that. Okay? Mine's is a little bit different. You can see the antenna elevation here, and then the manual range. I've kind of combined these two switches. Okay? To this forward switch here. This is in front of the throttle. And what it is in the real HOTAS, you have a knob that you can turn, and it's antenna elevation up and down. All right. I don't have knobs on here like you may have some, but I don't. So I actually use this 4-way switch, and I go antenna down and antenna up. That actually moves your radar scan up or down. Think of the radar beam as a flashlight coming out of your aircraft. You can point that flashlight up towards the sky and look at what's above you, or you can point that radar or that flashlight down towards the ground and see what's below you. Okay, so you can see why that would be important. If you're low level, you want to be looking up on your radar. If you're high, maybe you want to look down and look for some low flying MiGs that might ambush you, or some enemy ground attack aircraft. So it's important to have that. And then left is range knob down and range knob up. Range knob down is it's kind of like if your flashlight is, just imagine a huge flashlight, you're extending it to 10 miles. And then if you go range knob up, you can go up to 20 miles, and then up to 30 miles, and 60 miles, and 80 miles. So you're basically controlling how far that flashlight goes out in front of you in the dark, so you can actually pick up aircraft. Okay, there's benefits to having a shorter beam, because you can devote more energy to a quick scan close to you. Obviously, if you're in like a medium or close engagement, you want to have a shorter beam. But if you're looking for targets for anything that's in front of you, let's say you're going to strike a bridge or something, and you want to see 80 miles in front of you, then you want to use that maximum range and scan the entire air. All right, that's why that's important. I know I'm talking a lot. I hope this makes sense. I'm trying to explain why these switches are important, and that they're not just arbitrary, like, okay, this is a confusing mess, and why do I need to do this, right? You need to have these in your HOTAS system, because they're practical, right? So range knob down, range knob up, that controls the length of your flashlight, and then antenna tilt down and antenna tilt up controls if your flashlight is looking up or down. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so we took care of the range, we took care of the antenna elevation. And we have our uncaged switch as well, which was right there, if you remember that. And then I have some miscellaneous ones. You probably don't have buttons in front. I have an autopilot toggle, okay, which is, you can toggle, when you toggle it on, it'll usually maintain your attitude as well as your altitude. And then if you toggle it again, it'll keep you level at a certain altitude without banking your wings or anything. So it's very great, especially for flight leads, when you're trying to communicate and manage navigation and weapon systems and get everybody on point, where it can fly to a steer point for you, or it can maintain a certain altitude and heading. Okay, it's not cheating. It's in the real aircraft, and that's why they use it. It's because you're a weapon system manager primarily, and then your pilot secondarily. Both are extremely important, but when you start trying to employ weapons, if you let the autopilot fly for you, then you can focus on setting up your weapon timers, your countermeasures profiles, whether you need jamming or not, fencing in, fencing out, whatever the case may be. All right, and it's in the real aircraft, obviously. I have a view padlock. If you have an extra button, you can always throw a padlock on there. And whatever you're looking at, if you're using track R, or even if you're not, whatever you're looking at, it's going to padlock that object. It can do ground objects, runways, and especially helpful with air-to-air engagements, locking up MiGs. Okay, so I think that was the entire system. The only last thing I'll cover here is when I updated to Windows 10, BMS, kept forgetting my my bindings for some weird reason, especially my axes. Okay, so I'd come back in the game, and like this would be set to keyboard instead of device 1, and it would just mess things up. Okay, so I'll show you how you can fix that. If you go down here to axis mapping, and my music's off now, axis mapping and joystick calibration. These are the files that are saved by BMS to control your joystick axes and also your joystick calibration. Alright, so you want to save both of those. And what you're going to do is map everything perfectly. Make sure everything works, right? Your cursors aren't backwards or anything like that. Make sure your brakes aren't, doing something funky, aren't backwards, and that everything feels good as far as the saturation. And then you want to apply it and hit OK. When you save here, it's just for your key bindings. It has nothing to do with your joystick axes. Right? That's what's saved down here. All right. So then once you go down here, you want to right click on your axis mapping, and you want to click this read only. Okay. And then you want to do the same thing for joystick and read only. All right. A good idea is, before you make them read only, is to actually make a backup of them, so that you can, in case anything goes wrong and this gets messed up, you can just grab both the axis mapping data and you can grab the joystick calibration, and you can just throw them right back into here, and everything should be fine. BMS is very finicky about you disconnecting USB joysticks. So if you're running a joypad, and when you run BMS, and then the next time you unplug the joypad or the controller, and then you run BMS, it's going to get all confused because it's assigning a specific USB ID to your specific joysticks. So a good rule of thumb is, however you initially set up BMS, whatever controllers that you had connected, rudder pedals, Xbox 360 control, I don't know, make sure that all those things are exactly the same the next time you start it. Okay, and that's why you want these backups, because if that gets messed up, you can just drag and drop these back into here, and your axes should be restored and should be the same. Alright, so that was an overview. I know that was a long video, guys, but if you're just getting to 4.33, or even if you've been in Falcon 4.33, maybe this covered some things that you weren't aware of as far as the real F-16 HOTAS system and why it's used, and maybe I gave you some tips on how you can kind of smooth out your interface with the aircraft while you're flying. Alright, see you guys in the virtual skies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Hey guys, one last thing, I forgot to do the Countermeasures management switch, and obviously that's very important. The only thing you really want mapped that's very important is either CMDS drop chaff or drop flare. I'm pretty sure they do the same exact thing, because all it is, it's calling the program. And there's various programs. Maybe you just want flare only, maybe you want chaff, maybe you want a combination. 90% of the time that I'm flying, I'm usually running a flare and chaff program, and I like to release them manually. So you obviously want to be able to release those countermeasures to defeat missiles and things like that, right? Since you can cycle your programs on the ECM panel, you can choose what program you want, like right on the MFD and the F-18 Hornet. I have CMS up and CMS down reserved for steer point next and steer point previous. I'll explain. The reasoning for that is you're always switching steer points, whether you're doing it to go from your navigation steer point over to a target, or you have multiple targets that you have to engage and you're trying to kind of work that out in your brain, or maybe you're trying to you're defensive against a MiG or something, or you're getting engaged by a SAM and you just want to egress home and you just want to go waypoint 1. Well, that enables you to do that on the fly. Okay, you can go steer point next and steer point previous. In the real aircraft, you actually use a either the MFD or steer point up and steer point down on the ICP. In the F-16, obviously the Hornet's modeled after the F-16. On the keyboard, I'm pretty sure you can use ICP next and ICP previous, right? Which is page up and page down. At least for me, it might be different key binding for you. Page up and page down. So essentially, you don't have to take your hands off of the joystick to go page up and page down, or try to click on the ICP next and ICP previous, you can just do it right on your joystick, and that's this little bad boy right here. All right, and then left, it's an alternate program that you can run, or you can shoot out chaff and flare. It's all about your countermeasures management. Again, I don't really use that too often. I just kind of pre-plan that. So I have ICP nav, and what ICP nav does is it takes you out of all the air-to-air modes and air-to-ground modes, and it just puts you in basic navigation mode. All right, so you're not going to have target symbologies and all sorts of AMRAM symbols on your HUD or anything. I pretty much use that when I'm maybe my situational awareness, I'm breaking off a target, and maybe I just got off dogfight mode with a MiG or something like that, and I just want to know what the heck's going on, right? I just go ICP nav, or go in my case it's the left push of this button, and it'll take me back. It'll normalize everything. I'll have my HSD or my waypoints on the right, and I'll have my radar on the left, and just calms everything down, resets everything, so I can kind of decide where to go from there. Right now, obviously, you don't have to do that. You can literally go up to the top here and just do exactly what they do in the real aircraft, which you won't. I'm telling you, you won't be using these too often. But it's CMS right will release. I think CMS left releases as well, and then up and down will change your program on the fly. So just so you know. Okay, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed that video. See you next time.